Hallå, hallå. Ja, vi hörs då. Är det någon lyd då? Hvis någon kan bekräfta vi har lyd, så är det flott. Då kommer vi begynne. If anyone can confirm that we have noise. There we go. Amazing. Sorry about that. I'll try again. Good morning, everyone. And welcome back to Bitcoin for Breakfast, the first episode of 2024. And boy, do we have a doozy for you today. It is a big day in Bitcoin land. The United States Security and Exchange Commission is considering approving one or more Bitcoin exchange traded funds, ETFs, which will dramatically increase access to Bitcoin for traditional investors, nation states, pension funds, and other traditional investment vehicles. So a lot of Bitcoiners are looking forward to this with anticipation, excitement, maybe even nervosity, as it will be a paradigm shift perhaps in Bitcoin's history. But there has been some drama, there has been some chaos leading up to this approval, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. But before we get that far, I have to wish every one of you a really happy new year. This is the first episode of Bitcoin for Breakfast since 2024 started. It is the 20th episode since we switched to English in November. And I hope that throughout 2024, you will be getting your coffee ready with me as many mornings as you can. Sit down here and enjoy a little chat about Bitcoin, as we all do every time we have the chance. Now, there are so many people who said good morning in the chat. Usually I mention you all by name, but it is so good to see so many familiar faces still sticking around, still waiting throughout the entire bear market. You were with us in this show, especially the Norwegians, of course. And I am excited to start a new cycle with you. I think we're moving into good times. It's going to be a really, really nice journey for most of us, at least those who took the bear market as an opportunity to stack sats. All right, before we go to the SEC story, we should just talk about our regular numbers. It's been a while since the last episode, so it's worth just updating ourselves on where Bitcoin is, what's going on right now. And I just need to find the right window for you. Let's see here. Now, I am trying, hold on. I am trying for the first time to run this with the chat overlay on the right side of the screen so that everyone can see everyone's messages. That does limit my screen real estate a little bit. So if it turns out that we can't properly see the content that I mean to show you, you will, I might have to adjust that. But for the moment, let's say good morning to everyone. Make sure everyone can see what a great community we have around us here. All right, cool. The first thing we do is to check out the time chain calendar, and I immediately become aware of the problem I just pointed out. I think we're gonna have to take away the overlay a little bit, maybe put it back up every now and then. Little experimentation is never hurt anybody. All right, so it is block height 825,107. You know, for those of you who are new to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a blockchain. That's a chain of blocks. And since the beginning of time, there has been 825,107 blocks in the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, when we started this show in English in November, we were down, I think we were still in the 700,000 block range. And it felt a little bit like the next halving was still, you know, quite far away. We had 30,000 blocks left. Now it's 2024, and we have less than 15,000 blocks left until the Bitcoin halving. For those of you who are new to Bitcoin, the Bitcoin halving is when the amount of Bitcoin that's released approximately every 10 minutes, whenever there is a new block found in the Bitcoin blockchain. It releases a certain amount of new Bitcoin, rewards the miner who found that block with a certain amount of Bitcoin, and the current reward is at 6.25 per block. That's the subsidy for finding a Bitcoin block. But that won't last much longer. In 14,893 blocks, that will be cut in half to 3.125, traditionally leading to a certain supply shock in Bitcoin's market, often starting the next bullish cycle for those who have been around a few rounds. Now, the exchange rate currently pushing 46,000, the highest we've ever seen as long as this show has been running in English, giving us a current rate of 2,179 Satoshis per USD. I think we started the show at almost 5,000 Satoshis per USD. So this is a dramatic reduction from how much you could stack for $1 all the way back in November, which already seems like a lifetime away. The market cap is, as a result, squeezing upwards towards $900 billion. And soon I think we will see that $1 trillion mark, which is, of course, entirely just symbolic. It doesn't mean anything at all other than the fact that, of course, Bitcoin legitimacy depends on its narrative, and public legitimacy depends on its narrative. And being in the $1 trillion scale puts us up there with NVIDIA and Apple and Google. And perhaps more importantly, with gold, which is sitting pretty at $10 trillion market cap or somewhere around there. It will be interesting to see if Bitcoin were to do a 10x from here, let's say 500,000, as some people have mentioned. We would have a market cap that beats or approaches gold's market cap. And I don't think I have to stress just what a major shift in public discourse and narrative that could imply. So exciting times coming up for everyone who's paying attention to Bitcoin. Let's see, is there anything interesting else to mention here? I could mention that the estimated date of the halving keeps going down. We started at April 24th, now we're down to April 22nd. Who knows, by the time the halving actually comes around in April, we may have pushed that forwards a few more days, which could happen simply because there is more hash rate, that is computing power and energy, being put into the Bitcoin network than the current rate. And even though we do have a difficulty adjustment to account for that, it often lags by 2 weeks, and occasionally we get to skip ahead a few days just through sheer growth of the Bitcoin network. All right, looking at the charts, I've allowed myself to draw some lines today, do some astrology for men, because it's the first episode of 2024. It is not unnatural to just have some fun and speculate a little bit about where the Bitcoin price might be going. And while we could make all kinds of complicated analyses of the Bitcoin price using Fibonacci and God knows how many trend lines and support and resistance levels and you know what, it seems to me like there are four main. There is a main trend of Bitcoin where in each bull market it goes unsustainably high and then retreats below a certain support level, often the support level that it established during its bull run, and finds a new bottom and starts climbing upwards on another. I want to say vertical, but I mean diagonal line. And you can see here how well that fits. It stops at this line, starts creeping up this line, and then goes into an unsustainable bull run again, which interestingly enough stops exactly at the extended diagonal from the previous bull run, only to then retreat again, hit current support level, break down, and then go through the same process of finding a new bottom. So in 2020, we found the bottom here at 4,200 or some around $4,000. Did the same thing again. We didn't quite reach up to the diagonal of the last bull run, but not too far away enough that I think this theory holds. And once again, the same thing happens. We retreat back to that support line, only to see a breakdown and a search for a new bottom. So where are we in the cycle? Well, looking at previous cycles, which is obviously not a promise for the future, but perhaps an indicator of how Bitcoin works and the cycles it goes through. Bitcoin is currently crawling up that support line, and should the Bitcoin ETF be approved, should the halving have its usual impact on price, market, and attention, it's not unreasonable to expect us to go up to this previous trend line in a fairly short time. Now, should that happen like right now, like everybody's talking about, Samson Moe is talking about how we will see $1 million Bitcoin within a few weeks if this ETF is approved. Let's just see a $1 million Bitcoin would imply that the price ends up somewhere around here. Let's put in a little horizontal line just for fun to see what that actually means. Here's $1 million. There's $1 million. So we need to get up to that line. Now that would be unprecedented in Bitcoin's history, because it would mean that we would have to not just break through this previous support from the last bull run, but we would then have to move from that line at, let's say, for the next 2 months, that's going to be somewhere between 120 and 140,000 dollars. If we break past $140,000, let's just say that as an arbitrary number, we still have a huge journey to go above that. One argument in favor of this scenario playing out is, of course, that Bitcoin often does what we have never expected before. It's not something really, it's kind of what we do expect. However, if we break this resistance, then of course the sky is indeed clear. There is no meaningful resistance from here up to that 1 billion, up to that 1 million mark, other than numbers that people have thrown out there with 250,000, 500,000, you name it. Ultimately, just astrology for men. But there is then a period of price discovery, as we call it, when we don't know where the top is, and since there will be few sell orders concentrated in any particular area here, what we often see then is the price goes parabolical and often reaches one of those unsustainable levels that we've seen in the past in 2013, in 2017, and in 2021. Now, a more moderate path for Bitcoin, of course, would be to stop at this previous trend line. That would mean that if up before the halving, let's see, halving is April. So by April, 144,000 is the ceiling for Bitcoin, should it respect that trend line. If Bitcoin takes a bit longer, let's say we have a little pullback here, back to the trend line, which would be way more consistent with previous behavior. As we can see here, it usually takes some time crawling up that trend line. And should it do so, then it gives us more space to grow in the future. And let's say a very reasonable number I've heard mentioned a lot is 250,000 for this cycle. I would not be surprised if we go much further, given new developments with the SEC and ETFs and whatnot. But should none of those external factors matter too much, and Bitcoin keeps doing what it's doing, 250,000 sounds very reasonable to me. And 250,000 is around December 2024, which is perfectly aligned with what we've seen in previous bull cycles. Although with one caveat, you see here the peak was reached in March 21, so a little bit later than December 2020, which is what this would imply. However, in December 2017, we did see this play out perfectly, exactly at the same month of the year even. Although history won't repeat perfectly. So this is just a broad indication of what Bitcoin has done before and what it might do, given the actually the known unknowns in this case, the known unknown being how the SEC will treat the Bitcoin ETF and, of course, all the consequences that might play out from the existence of an exchange-traded fund with Bitcoin. If you have some thoughts on this, please shoot out your comment in the chat. This is just my view, and it's probably wrong. So I'd like to hear what you think and correct me where you think I'm being absolutely silly. All right, cool. Let's move on to the mempool. We are having the lowest fees we've seen since the early days of this show. In the beginning of this show, it was still not heating up yet, and we could still get transactions into the mempool for about 10 sats a byte. Those days are over, even in calm areas. We are now up to 35 sats per byte in the latest blocks, but that is actually a very low fee level compared to what we've seen in the last 2 months. If you wanted to do UTXO consolidation or any other action that required a lot of transactions, the last 2 months have not been a good time for you. But if you have postponed doing so until now, this might be the moment before things really kick off again. For those of you who are not familiar with the mempool, it's a brilliant tool to visualize incoming and outgoing blocks. You can even open each block and see the exact contents of it, both what's being put together in the moment with the current incoming blocks and what has been put together, what came out, what we expected, what we got, etc. Incredibly useful tool to get a quick overview, especially if you want to send a transaction and you want to make sure that you get the transaction in within a certain amount of time. You might want to check the fee level here before you set some transaction fee level on your transaction. Next peak in October 2025, says Alif. In my opinion, plus minus half a year. Let's just look at October 2025. When is that? October 2025, that is all the way here. And that, of course, gives us room to grow all the way to 579,000 without disrespecting this trend line at all. So without having to do anything unusual or spectacular, Bitcoin, should it peak in October 2025, will have room to grow well past $500,000, which would put Bitcoin in the same range as gold's market cap. It's not the market cap, it's just the price of gold. And that, of course, is a very important narrative point worth making. I suppose since we have gold open here, it's worth maybe just mentioning that I think the gold ETF, the equivalent trade for gold, I believe was approved in 2004. Can somebody correct me if that's wrong? But I believe it was approved in 2004, so around here somewhere. And as you can see, since the gold ETF was approved in 2004, it went from a low of $380 to almost $2,000, where it's been stuck in a range from $1,000 to $2,000 ever since. And in the last 4 years, it's been stuck between $2,000 and $1,600. So it probably won't play out the same way for Bitcoin, other than I believe it is a very bullish signal. The actual market movements will be looking very different because Bitcoin is far superior to gold, among other things. But still, kind of cool to check out. Maybe you will also appreciate looking at the relative price of Bitcoin versus gold. We often compare Bitcoin to USD, and when you look at USD, it's obvious that Bitcoin is going up because fiat has no bottom. And as long as fiat has no bottom, there is no top for Bitcoin. With gold, however, it's a little bit different, given that gold has a certain inflation resistance. While Bitcoiners often criticize how we don't know how much gold deposits there are and how ultimately the inflation rate of gold is unpredictable, it isn't entirely true, because extracting gold is very, very difficult. So knowing about gold deposits doesn't itself increase the gold supply. In fact, the costs of extracting it are often higher than the economic value of the gold, which actually puts a limit on how much gold can be extracted, and thus the inflation rate of gold. The stock to flow, if you want, of gold is therefore relatively stable, similar to Bitcoin. However, with the halving coming up in 14,000 something blocks, we will find Bitcoin's issuance becoming smaller as a share of the total supply than for gold. So for the first time in history, Bitcoin's inflation rate, if you want, will be lower than that of gold. And of course, unlike gold, we know the exact issuance rate for the next 116 years. So a long time into the future, even though the actual event of the future halvings haven't happened yet, they can easily be priced in advance to the extent that people have awareness of them, unlike with gold, where it's impossible to price in future developments, given that we do not know if it will become easier to extract gold, if we will find new deposits, etc. So what do we see when we compare gold and Bitcoin is a very similar picture, actually, as with BTC USD, just slightly compressed, slightly moderated by the fact that gold is a harder asset than fiat. But you can see how, of course, it's almost meaningless to look at the first few years when Bitcoin went from a relative rate of 0 to 1. But if you zoom in towards the end here, we are currently at a relative rate of 23. That means that it currently costs 23 gold bars. I guess this is the price of a gold bar. I actually don't know. Maybe you can tell me. Is this the price of a gold bar we're talking about when we're talking about the price of gold? Is it a kilo of gold? I don't know. I just assume that the amount is stable. But either way, it would take 23 times that amount to buy one Bitcoin at the moment. And should Bitcoin go to 500,000, this will be a number of 200 times to get to the 200 gold bars to buy a Bitcoin, if it is gold bars indeed we are talking about. So clear that Bitcoin is far more inflation resistant and has a far stronger future than gold when looking at the relative development between these two assets over time. All right, I'm ranting a little bit, and I am perhaps a little bit on thin water. It's time to talk about the ETF debacle, and let us just quickly start. I am not an expert at ETFs. Traditional financial markets is not my forte, but an ETF is an exchange traded fund, which means that you have a fund that you can buy and sell, invest in on a regular exchange through traditional markets, through traditional instruments, and that fund is tracking an underlying index, in this case, Bitcoin. So a fund wrapped around Bitcoin that people can buy the fund and thus have exposure to Bitcoin's price movements in their own portfolio. So far, so good. This, of course, means that traditional investors who have previously who have previously been locked out of the market, often because of regulation rules on what kind of investments they're allowed to include in their portfolio, especially traditional asset managers has this problem, but also pension funds and governments have this issue of how do you hold an asset like Bitcoin if it is not an ETF, if you cannot have it as a exchange traded fund, because private Bitcoin keys, direct exposure to Bitcoin, while preferable, while recommended, while something that I hope every single one of you out there takes care to do yourself, is not necessarily the best way for traditional financial services and governments to get involved in Bitcoin. All right, so that's just a brief overview of why ETFs matter, why this is such a big deal. We will suddenly have a whole new investor class accessing Bitcoin. One thing to know is that a ETF is not Bitcoin. While they will be buying Bitcoin to support their fund, and the price of the fund will presumably track the price of Bitcoin pretty closely, you will not hold your own Bitcoin private keys. You cannot pay anyone with that Bitcoin that you have invested in. It is entirely a price tracker that you're adding to your portfolio. Nothing wrong with that, but it's important to know the difference before you go ahead and buy a ETF thinking that you now own Bitcoin. You own an ETF which tracks Bitcoin. If you want to own Bitcoin, you should go on Relay app, use the code Eric, get yourself some discounts on the fees, and then you buy yourself a BitBox. You'll find the link in the description of this video on YouTube or wherever you're watching it, which will let you buy a BitBox, by far the most user-friendly, secure, and advanced hardware wallet currently available out there, and then you store your own keys yourself. So that's just a warning, a disclaimer for everybody. Now, everyone expected the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission to approve a Bitcoin ETF today, this afternoon. Now, should that happen, of course, it will be a seismic shift in the market, and so people have been watching this minute by minute, seeing if there's any hints, any suggestion that this might happen. And a couple of days ago, Gary Gensler put out a series of tweets where he made recommendations to his followers about how to safely invest in what he called crypto, but which I think we should read as Bitcoin, hinting that perhaps he is preparing the ground for this approval coming today. But then something very unexpected happened last night. Less than 24 hours before we expected the approval to come, the SEC suddenly tweeted, "Today, the SEC grants approval for Bitcoin ETFs for listing on all registered national security exchanges. The approved Bitcoin ETFs will be subject to ongoing surveillance and compliance measures to ensure continued investor protection." Now, this looks like a completely ordinary, straightforward tweet from the US Security and Exchange Commission, and it was up for a good 40 minutes before they deleted it. But and of course, during those 40 minutes, the Bitcoin Twitter and media at large went nuts over this sudden news a day early. But it didn't take long before the tweet was removed, and Gary Gensler put out a tweet saying that the SEC Twitter account was compromised and an unauthorized tweet was posted. The SEC has not approved the listing and trading of spot Bitcoin exchange traded products. Now, of course, it is an open question, which I will leave to you, dear viewer, to judge yourself. Whether or not this was indeed a hacked tweet, somebody getting access to the account and posting this tweet on behalf of the SEC without the SEC's knowledge, or whether it was a scheduled tweet that had been simply scheduled a day too early or by accident, or somebody clicked the send now by accident, some intern that didn't know what they were doing. Upon closer investigation, however, Twitter confirms. Twitter's support writes, "We can confirm that the account, SEC Gov, was compromised, and we have completed a preliminary investigation. Based on our investigation, the compromise was not due to any breach of access systems, but rather due to an unidentified individual obtaining control over a phone number associated with the SEC Gov account through a third party. We can also confirm that the account did not have," and this is incredible, "that the account did not have two-factor authentication enabled at the time when the account was compromised. We encourage all users to enable this extra layer of security." Now, that is just incredible. We have a Twitter account that represents an institution that is supposed to protect investors. That is their raison d'etre. And this is a power that obviously rests a lot on communication and how you do communication, and especially in markets with such large amounts of money involved, even small mistakes can move the market and cause massive disruption and liquidations. And that is, of course, exactly what happened when this tweet came out. If we look at the Bitcoin price again, we can see that, I'm going to zoom in much further than we usually ever do on Bitcoin. I'm going to say 15 minutes. We will see that upon this approval tweet going out, Bitcoin's price shot up. Actually, we can go even smaller to see the details of what happened. The Bitcoin price shot up from 46,700-ish to almost 48,000 within minutes of this approval tweet being posted, before rapidly crashing down all the way to $44,800 within the next 10-15 minutes. Now, interestingly, that crash came before the tweet was debunked. So this entire price movement seems to be the organic, true price movement upon a actual Bitcoin ETF approval, assuming that nobody has access to the funds until at least the 11th or the 12th of January, before relatively rapidly recovering. And now, I think by the time we found out what was going on, it was around 11:15 my time in Berlin. And since then, the price has stabilized pretty close to where we were before the fake tweet went out. Actually, I don't know if I want to call it a fake tweet. That's giving SEC too much credit. It is very possible, I think even likely, that this tweet was intended to be sent, but that they cannot admit their mistake, because admitting your mistake here means they have responsibility for this price movement. And this price movement liquidated. I've heard several numbers. Some people say that there were $300 million worth of shorts and longs on leverage that were liquidated in the single price movement. I have even heard numbers up to $1 billion in open interest being closed within this 1 hour window after that tweet was sent. That is, of course, money that the SEC is now directly responsible for having lost. So they cannot, under any circumstances, admit their responsibility, admit their mistake here, because that will mean that investors have the potential to sue them and see if they can get some of their money back. So I think there's a game going on trying to put out the fire of this fake tweet, but that's how it is. All right. A little fun fact at the end of all of this is that Gary Gensler himself put out a tweet not too long ago, just a few months ago, reminding people to secure important financial accounts with exactly multi-factor authentication, the very thing that they had not enabled on the SEC's own Twitter account. Really, really remarkable stuff, completely devoid, completely regardless of Bitcoin. This is incredible, incredibly irresponsible, dangerous behavior from the SEC, and directly against the recommendations they themselves make to other investors in the market. So really a remarkable chain of events in the last 24 hours. But the big question remains: how will this affect that? How will this affect the actual approval of a Bitcoin ETF? Now, you would think that a big, heavy, serious institution like the SEC would be relatively unaffected by this. If they have already decided to approve a Bitcoin ETF, then that will be approved, and we will see a tweet similar to this one this afternoon, and we will be able to actually observe the real price movements of Bitcoin after a ETF approval. However, there is, of course, the possibility that yesterday's events and the consequences of those events in the price will lead the SEC to delay its announcement, delay its decision, which I believe would then be pushed back to until March. So 2 more months to wait until we can get an actual approval of an ETF. There are arguments in favor and against this. Of course, the arguments in favor are obvious. They have made a mistake. They have now caused market disruption in a way that they did not intend, and they may need to revisit this later once that disruption has settled down, and once they'll be able to go through with a proper investigation internally of what has happened, and possibly also after they've received lawsuits from the many losers of this price movement. But on the other hand, there are very big, heavy players involved in getting this ETF approved as well. Not least Orc Invest, who has put forward the ETF, but probably also BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and other big investment banks that are part of the seed capital of the initial investors of this ETF. Now, they are probably not very keen to see a further delay on this ETFs. They're ready to go. And with such big interests still pushing for the Bitcoin ETF to get approved today and start trading within a few days, I think there's a good chance that this will remain and that this will not affect the future events of the SEC, that they will indeed approve a Bitcoin ETF this afternoon. So that's what I'm leaning towards expecting, that sometime this afternoon, according to this tweet, sometime around 3 o'clock, perhaps, sometime around 3 o'clock American time. And I don't know, I guess it's Washington we're talking about here. So 6-7 hours behind me. That would mean that around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock my time, we should be seeing a similar approval if this was a early warning about what's about to happen. So pay attention later. Once the Bitcoin ETF has been approved, first I would expect to see large market movements. I choose not to make predictions about which directions things could go. Some people think it's a sell the news event. Some people think it's a massive buy the news event. We have heard predictions of everything from $1 million down to, they still exist. Some bears who claim that we could go to $10,000. I think that is absolutely ludicrous, but that's how it is. So I will not make predictions about what will happen exactly in the short run. But in the long run, this will, of course, open up the Bitcoin landscape to the mainstream in a way that we simply have not had in previous cycles. So whether it's about mainstream media mentions and the angles that they take on Bitcoin, or it's about how traditional investors see them, how people organize their pension funds, or how nation states choose to secure their assets, we now have a vehicle that structurally will affect everything. And I'm excited to see the consequences of this. I do want to add the disclaimer, actually, before we go on to, we are close to finishing the show. It was a long talk, but I do want to add a disclaimer once again that an ETF is not real Bitcoin. You do not have the keys. You cannot spend them. You cannot hold them in your own wallets. If you want exposure to Bitcoin, buy your own Bitcoin at Relay App with the code ERIC. Get yourself a BitBox with the link in my description and store those Bitcoins safely at home in your hardware wallet. Make sure you protect your seed phrase so you can back it up if there's anything wrong with the hardware wallet, and live happily ever after. Yes. Oh, give me a minute. I think I can do one thing to fix the sound a little bit, but I forgot. right. Let's look through a few comments now that I've been talking for quite a while, and I see there's a lot of comments in the chat. So this is the moment. If you have something you want to say, or some questions or some ideas, share them now, because I'm going to go through the comments this very minute. Let's see. We have the good mornings. Thank you guys for letting me know about the sound so quickly. That was helpful. I could probably have been talking for half an hour before I really checked the chat and realized that nobody can hear me. So that's good. Let's see. We have a spammer here trying to sell me a promotion. Let us just block that guy right away. Yes, Svein, I understand your international ambitions, but I miss the Norwegian language. Me too. There is, I guess anyone who's multilingual has this feeling that it's almost like we're different people in different languages. Different languages shape our brains and the way we think and the way we talk. And a lot of the times, the way I was thinking about Bitcoin and talking about Bitcoin in Norwegian is something I definitely miss. And I think I do want to, in 2024, find some kind of mixed solution for this. So perhaps we do 2 shows in English and 1 in Norwegian every week, so that we have still a show that is dedicated to the incredible Norwegian Bitcoin community. For all of those watching internationally who's not from Norway, really pay attention to Norway. It has one of the highest concentrations of Bitcoin maxis in the world. We have fantastic authors like Rune Østgaard, who has written Fraud Coin, a book I really recommend you read if you haven't. We have no less than 2 great Bitcoin conferences in Northern Lightning, a pure Bitcoin and Lightning conference, and of course the Oslo Freedom Forum, the world's largest human rights conference, which is also heavily Bitcoin focused. We have around 3% of the global hash rate of Bitcoin, 3% for a country that is less than 0.00 nothing of the world's population. So massively overrepresented in the Bitcoin network itself. And of course, we have major investors like Kjell Inge Røkke, who was early in understanding the importance of Bitcoin and have been setting up companies to stack and store Bitcoin for the long term. That's just like a few things off the top of my head. We also have an endless amount of meetups coming up. And I have actually promised, or I'm going to save that to later. I have promised to let you all know about the next meetups in Norway at the end of this show, but we're going to get there. All right, and going on to the chats. So yeah, I agree. Let's have a little bit of more Norwegian occasionally. Gunnar recommends using Sparrow wallet with your cold wallet. It's easy to manage UTXOs. That's a really good recommendation. Sparrow wallet may be the single best wallet in existence. It is incredibly complex and advanced. You can do almost anything at the same time as it's really streamlined and user-friendly. It is, however, a desktop wallet, so you use this in your browser or on your desktop, but don't let that stop you. Definitely recommend using Sparrow Wallet for organizing your UTXOs. UTXOs, by the way, is basically your Bitcoin. They are unspent transaction outputs. So whatever was not spent, whatever was returned to you after you made a transaction, is your UTXO and represents a certain amount of Bitcoin that was not spent in your last transaction. So you will have a long number of UTXOs, which together make up the total value of your Bitcoin, more or less. Okay, let's see here. When did you notice? Kindly inbox me now for help. When did I notice what, Jax? I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm also not sure if this is a real message, but let me know. 4 minutes after the false tweet, Gensler tweeted that it was fake from his personal account. Did he? Let's see. So the tweet was posted 3:11, and Gensler posted at 3:26. Okay, so 15 minutes after the tweet went up, he tweeted that it was compromised. The tweet, however, stayed up until 3:41. So another 15 minutes after this tweet went out. That's a good half hour. People were told that the SEC had approved a Bitcoin ETF, obviously enough to make people to let people make rash decisions about their leverage positions in Bitcoin. So yes, let's see. We have Community Lightning Bitcoin. I think that's just it's just an attempt at tagging me. Then I hope you feel seen. Here's a tip from Paul: get myself a good microphone that I can speak closer to, so we get that lovely radio sound. It's cheap and simple. The sound is pretty shaky the way it is. You know what? You're absolutely right. I do have a very proper mic. Oh, hello, 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 hello. Yeah. So I was just about to say that I do have a proper microphone that works perfectly well. I guess I can't say that with confidence, given that I literally just fell off the moment I lifted it up from the ground. But that is the reason why it's not closer to my mouth. I have this arm, right, that you can lean in and have your microphone right by your mouth so that you get that lovely radio sound that you're looking for. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Go for Breakfast. This is the sound that you're waiting for. But given that that arm is non-functional at the moment and my cable is so loose that it falls out if I try to move it, I have compromised and put it on my desk for the moment. But this is advice that is well taken, and which I would love to address one way or another as soon as possible. Actually, maybe with that said, it's a good time for me to ask for your support, because this microphone wasn't for free, nor is any of the things that I need to keep running the show throughout the bull market. If you'd like to support me, there's a link in the bottom of the video description on YouTube, on Substream, and other places, which is simply get.albi/Kongerika, where you can leave me a Bitcoin tips. It allows you to choose an amount, generate a QR code, which you can scan with your Lightning wallet, and then send me a few sats. Now, I put all the sats I make on this show, which is not much, to be honest, a few thousand sats each show. I put that aside for my daughters. I have 3 beautiful young daughters who are too young to stack themselves. So all that goes to their hardware wallet, except for what I need to run the show itself. So for the bandwidth and for the microphone and whatever else might be. So if you'd like to support me and send a few sats to my daughters as well, check out that link. Or if you're on YouTube, you can even use the super chat. Send me a few fiat kroners as well. Also appreciated, although I definitely prefer Bitcoin. All right, cool. Yes, I'm glad you like that idea, Cecilia. Switching between Norwegian and English, I think, is would allow us all to satisfy our ambitions. Part of the reason that I want to speak in English as much as possible is not because of my own personal ambitions. Part of it is in order to be a vehicle for the Norwegian, the Nordic, maybe even the Germanic Bitcoin sphere to the broader international audience. I think there's a lot of stuff going on in our region of the world that is simply invisible to the broader English-speaking Bitcoin community, which is so dominant that if we don't have local Bitcoiners presenting our content in English while focusing back on our own regions, it can be hard for us to be seen, discovered, get investment, maybe have future entrepreneurs get their eyes open for the possibilities in our region. So this is my attempt at doing something good for Bitcoin and doing something good for where I am from, by connecting the two, by allowing internationals to see what's going on in the Nordics and to choose to support, invest, found, whatever else is good for Bitcoin. All right, cool. Now here we go. Here we go at about the Bitcoin meetup. Let me just find the details of that, and I'm going to show you in a tweet. Should of course prepare this, but this is where we are. So there is a meetup coming up in Trondheim. Bitcoin meetup in Trondheim, Norway's 3rd biggest city. It's coming up on Saturday already. What a great day to meet some good Bitcoiners in the middle of the day. Take a break from your farm, from your family, from your kids, from your studies, from whatever else keeps you busy, and go meet some brilliant Bitcoiners at the work in Trondheim. Starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm going to read this in English so that everybody can hear what it's about. It says, welcome to the year's first Bitcoin meetup. If you did not talk enough about Bitcoin in over Christmas, you will get the opportunity now. This time we put together an exciting program, and we will have the opportunity to get the first Norwegian copies of Unbar. Unbar is the brand new book from Rune Østgaard, the author of Fraudcoin, definitely worth checking out. I haven't read it myself yet, but I am confident that it's worth a read, and I know my copy is on the way right now. So you can get your first copies before they even hit the book shops. We will have Bitcoin expert Johan Tors Halset. Some of you may know him from different Bitcoin conferences and podcasts. He's been talking about Lightning in the past. And he will give an introduction to Bitcoin technology and update us on the latest development. The author and the lawyer, Rune Østgaard, again, the author of Freudcoin, will be talking about Bitcoin's price development and what he expects going forward. And finally, the graphical designer, Mathias Storhaug and Rune will be selling and signing their new book, Unbar. So whether you are an enthusiast or a beginner or just curious, please join. You're all welcome to participate and contribute to exciting conversations. It's completely free, doesn't require any membership or anything. So welcome to Bitcoin Meetup in Trondheim this Saturday at 1 o'clock, where you can pick up a copy of Unbar, signed and packed by the author himself. Pretty cool. All right, nice. We have good morning from Denmark. Good morning, Jake. Very good to see you. Jake is a very cool guy. I just want to talk a little bit about Jake, actually. I like to do that. The Norwegian Bitcoin community is very privileged because we got organized early. We managed to keep the narrative both publicly and among ourselves Bitcoin oriented, largely Bitcoin maxi, which has really shaped the development of Bitcoin in Norway, of course, because you have all these people who otherwise would have entered a big open field and would have been distracted by leveraged trades and shitcoins and God knows what. But instead, they enter a field where they are met by well-informed Bitcoin maxis dominating the conversation to such a degree that they can avoid a lot of the pitfalls that you find in other places. Denmark is not so lucky. Denmark has had a community that cannot be called a Bitcoin community. It can only be called a crypto community. And it has been largely based on speculation, shitcoinery, leverage on exchanges, and all the stuff that we all know can be so toxic to individuals and the community. However, Jake is probably the most consistent, Jakob, I think his actual name is. Jakob is the most consistent supporter and vocal spokesperson for Bitcoin I have seen on Twitter. And he has very early on connected himself to the Norwegian Bitcoin community, hopefully found inspiration, strength, and support from us. And I know now that last year, Denmark got their first two Bitcoin podcasts running. And I haven't checked in on them now for a few weeks, but it looks like that is going great. So try your best if you have the opportunity to support our dear Danish brothers. They need it, and Jake, I think, will really appreciate it, so he doesn't stand alone in that storm for too much longer. But really well done, Jake. You're a great guy, and we need your kind of dedication and contribution to make Bitcoin a success, not for Bitcoin's sake, but for the place we're from. Because Bitcoin will happen anyways, but how it happens everywhere is really up to us. And if you love the people who raised you, if you love the community you grew up in, maybe, although most Bitcoiners are not too nationalistic, maybe you even love your country a little bit. And in that case, you have a really strong interest to take care of that country, take care of that community, take care of that family. And the best way to do it is really to ensure that your society adopts Bitcoin in the best possible way. All right. Thank you, Jake. John says, it did not sound like that table worked at all. It does work now, doesn't it? I mean, I hope you hear me. I hope I'm not just sitting here talking. Looks like the microphone bar is moving. I think it's working, but I should definitely put this up on an arm and fix the whole sound thing that was recommended by Paul earlier. You are so welcome, Jake. It's well deserved, and I hope we will see the Danes catch up with us soon, because apes together strong and all that, right? Plus, I think Scandinavians have similar issues, similar problems, and hence similar opportunities. So, yeah. Let's see, only 2 sats to send Lightning now, so don't hesitate. That's right. Again, if you like this show, if you want to see me do this as often as possible throughout this entire bull run, I am really dependent on your support. I know nobody wants to give away a single sat right now because we're all hoping to become millionaires or something. But really, every single sat is so appreciated, so inspirational, and practically necessary to support the show, both the tools we use, the services we use, and the bandwidth I use. So please, really would appreciate some support over Lightning. What happens now, asks Afrox. Now that the SEC compromised my best decision, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Let's see if I can interpret your question. Please feel free to elaborate what you mean so I don't get it wrong. But I interpret the question as something like, I consider Bitcoin to be my best decision ever, and the SEC tweet has compromised it. I'm not sure if I follow that. I also have personally no interest in what happens with the Bitcoin ETF because I am a long-term DCA stacker. I buy a little bit of Bitcoin at regular intervals, no matter what the price is. I bought at 69,000, I bought at 16,000, and I will continue to buy at 1 million. I will continue to buy at 10 million. I will never, ever stop buying Bitcoin at any price whatsoever. So a little swing between 48,000 and 45,000 is about as important to me as a fart in Africa. It is irrelevant, other than that in addition to my own personal success, I want Bitcoin to fundamentally change the world we live in and hopefully give financial freedom and inclusion to a whole generation of billions of people who have previously been locked out from traditional financial markets, who have not been able to access a bank account, who have only been able to dream about doing international transactions or access international trade with zero friction. This is the opportunity and the promise that lies in Bitcoin to fundamentally alter human existence for the better. And the SEC tweeting a little bit earlier is not going to derail any of that. So if that was what you meant by your question, I hope that answers it sufficiently. All right, cool. Hey, I really appreciate all the great comments today. That is super, super nice. And it's a great opportunity for me to sit here and actually talk to you, to think a little bit about the stuff you're saying, about the questions you're asking. Really, really appreciate that. So please come back to on Friday morning, when we're going to do this show again. Come back on Friday morning, keep riffing with me. Let's do this throughout the whole bull market. Let's become a gang and crush it. So really appreciate that. What else? This show does not promote itself. I do not spend any money on promotion. Don't have any big sponsors, although we do have one great sponsor, which is BitBox. Oops, let's see here. I am so sorry. We do have one fantastic sponsor on this show. It's our first sponsor, BitBox. Again, BitBox is really the most secure, user-friendly, and advanced wallet you can find, and it's made in Switzerland, which is kind of irrelevant, but it gives me a sense of financial security that it's named, that it's made in Switzerland. I like that. I like that. I have to admit. And I want you to know that I am not saying this because BitBox is now paying me a little bit to do so. I was a BitBox user before BitBox ever approached me. I was a fan of BitBox before BitBox ever approached me. I recommended BitBox before BitBox ever approached me. And it is only very fortunate to me that BitBox decided that they would like to support me to continue doing so, which I would have done anyways. But this way, the show becomes a little bit more sustainable, which is kind of cool. All right. What else? I think we are getting there. Stay until the end of the show. We always play a little Bitcoin meme at the end of the show, and you definitely want to have that, catch that, a little inspiration every single day. So I think if there are no more questions at the moment, all I can say is come back on Friday morning at 8:30. I want to see everyone back here with a cup of coffee, with some good questions, with perhaps some excitement from whatever will happen in the next 24 hours with the SEC. And then we will track this adventure together. All right, I'm trying to twist my brain to see if there's something I forgot. I recommended you to get the BitBox hardware wallet, which you will find a link to in the description of this video. We recommend getting yourself one. It exists in several editions. The BitBox Bitcoin only edition is the one I obviously recommend. And finally, again, if you want to support this channel, go to getalbi.com/p/kongvika. I will be cheeky enough to share that in the chat. Choose a small amount of sats and send me a tip. Even if it is not a meaningful financial support, it is meaningful as an inspirational support, and I really, really appreciate it. With all of that said, I think it is time to wish you all a beautiful day. I hope you go crush it wherever you are. I hope you stay sane, stay calm, stay centered. I hope you take care of the people you love, and I hope they take care of you. And then I hope we see each other again on Friday at 8:30 Central European Time. Goodbye.
For we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon and to the planets beyond. We have had our failures, but so have others, even if they do not admit them. To be sure, we are behind, and will be behind for some time. But we do not intend to stay behind, and in this decade we shall make up and move ahead. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. The great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.